So, as an athlete, you were a runner. How do you get into that amongst all the other sports when you're growing up and you decide, this is my focus, I want to be a runner?
I had a mom who was just really before her time. And she would always say that she was never an athlete herself, but in terms of just raising all 5 strong young women and really understanding that sports should have been just as big as part of our lives as it was my brother's. So I also think I was hyperactive, literally, to have the diagnosis, which is a shock to nobody. But I think in her way of coping with how to do that, especially I was the last of 7 children, and my mother was deep into her 40s when I arrived.
Bridget, just go run.
Yes, exactly.
What's going to get her out of the longest?
And so from day one, we were just in sports. I always tell the story. I tell it to my students a lot because it's, when one door closes, there's always another one that opens, right? I remember my father, I had tried to play the sports that everyone else played in my family, namely basketball. Mm-hmm. And I can remember my father sitting down with me, and it's actually, I had gone for a run one day. And I went out, and I couldn't get my driver's license yet. And it was before we had phones that could map it. Sure. I said, Dad, can you take me to see how far I ran? And it was like a June day. And I came back, and it was 9 miles. Yeah. And he pulls the car into our little parking spot where we were living. By that time, they had downsized, so it was like me and them in a townhouse. And he's like, listen, Bridge, I just got to break to you. Like, you didn't get the gene. Like, you're not playing basketball. Like, you're trying, and I see you, but you're not going to play basketball in college. And you need to figure something out for college because you're the last, and there's nothing left in the kitty.
Right, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So, not that there was, it's Irish. I mean,
Sure,
we're Irish.
yeah.
There wasn't much in the kitty to
Right.
begin with.
Yeah.
So we went, and I started pivoting over. And the first sport I gave up was field hockey, which was hard. The next sport was rowing, because at that point I'd pretty much done every sport except gymnastics and dance,
right.
not my area. And so one by one I started giving up the sports. And then by the time I was a junior, I was just running. But even then, even back in that day, that was a little bit late. Sure. So I didn't really know where I was going to end up.
This is high school?
Yeah, I give a ton of credit to my high school coach, Chuck Godfrey, who just recently retired from Maryvale as a coach. Still a huge mentor of mine in life. Really, I'd say to him, I don't know where I would have ended up without him in my life, because he really said, like, yes, you can do running. And more importantly, he said to me, if you can get yourself to run 9 miles, just because you can get yourself to sit down and do your math homework, Bridget. Right. And so those are the conversations that great coaches have with their athletes.
Right. And then what was it like to run Division I? I mean, at that point, you've made that leap at UB. And
so there's a little bit of an interesting story. I didn't start in Division I. Coach Barry will tell you that Coach Dick Barry, who is the longtime legendary coach at UB, he'll tell you that he recruited me. I don't know if he did. We have a good conversation about that every time we get a chance to visit. I ended up going to a school called Dickinson College, and I have to credit my other high school coach, Steve Burley, for making that connection. The person who coaches there is a guy by the name of Don Nichter, still there, tremendously successful, Lancaster guy, Niagara University guy, so it's that connection. I went down there, and the summer before I went down there, I trained with the legend Vicki Mitchell. She won't remember it. I was Vicki Mitchell, Jeanette Bonrui, and a group of folks that were training out of Cortland and Ithaca, and that changed my life. And when I went down, all of a sudden I'd gone to nationals. I was on the cusp of an All-American. So here's the thing. I was paying for school.
Sure, right.
And I got the second-year package, and it wasn't what I could afford. And so that was my first bump into NCAA rules.
Right.
And I came from a generation where, my father wouldn't have dreamed of calling or contacting anyone on my behalf, and my mother certainly wasn't going to. So I did my own negotiating with Syracuse, Canisius, and UB. And I ended up at UB for a bunch of reasons, which is a longer story, and I don't think you have time for it. Technically, they weren't supposed. NCAA said I wasn't supposed to get money. Right. Back in the day, that was one of the rules that we changed in '97 because it was a stupid rule. Right. And it says if you transferred from Division III to Division I, you could be immediately eligible, but you couldn't get athletic aid for your first year. UB was new.
Right, sure, right.
They didn't know that rule.
Right.
So I can say this because the statute.
Before Kelly Cruttenden.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Before they had a compliance officer.
Sure.
There's another fun story because Mike Gentile is the one who came to me deep into my first semester at UB and say, you got to move out of the dorms. You don't have a scholarship, Bridget. Really? But Canisius and Syracuse wanted me to go there, but they said, hey, we don't have any money for you. in my like 19-year-old
Didn't connect
mind,
yet,
it was
then.
just like, I guess I'm not good enough.
Right.
You know? But they didn't have any money for me, so I had to go where the money was. And that was UB. It was the best decision I ever made. I mean, Dick Barry and Coach Barry and that whole UB organization, just phenomenal experience. But I did have to move out of the dorms and pay my own way my first year.
And while the running part I think is very interesting, I think that helps you transition to be the student athlete advocate
100%.
and move into the NCAA and all that. So talk a little bit about that and how that was a driver
So
for you.
I think, Mike Gentile, who's Professor Mike Gentile, recently retired from Niagara University, longtime associate athletic director of compliance at a bunch of different places. He came to me and broke the news. It was the first person, like he was new to the job, and I was like his first, like, we got an NCAA rule violation. So as kind of like a concession, I got a work study job,
Right.
and I started working for Mike.
Sure.
And I was mad. I mean, I was like, you seriously? Like, I'm a cross-country runner. I am not Cliff Scott.
Right,
You know,
right.
I am not a member of the UB women's basketball team. No one's going to notice that I'm here in any real sense. But rules are rules, and
Yep.
we followed them, and I took that away from me my whole entire life. We
Right.
follow rules. But I started working with him and really started just learning a lot about the NCAA rule process, to the extent that I ended up staying with him, earning my law degree,
Right.
working in athletics for 4 or 5 years after I was a student athlete.
Great.
And working like that, you get to give back. You get to work with young people. You mentioned coaches a lot just in our little conversation here. You wouldn't think long distance or running is a really coach sport. Just talk about. I mean, you've worked with some legendary people.
Yeah.
Is it more coaching than an outsider would?
Oh
would
my
see?
gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I'm so glad you asked that question, Boone, because the work that I do now, and I just when I was at Project Play, there was such this emphasis of like your soccer, your basketball, and like it was almost like running. Like they just tell you to run. And I did have some wonderful that's not new to me. I remember they switched my high school coach my senior year of high school, and by this time I was running well. Not nearly what I'd get to, but I was running well. And they switched in, and I loved him, the legendary coach Chuck Huber, who had coached my brother and Williamsville South football to multiple state championships. So he came in as my coach my last semester, and like that was just an interesting, like, coach, no, you just, no, I can't eat that donut. The weight guys
Right.
can,
Yeah, right.
but I can't eat that before I go run my 5
The throwers
miles.
are over there eating.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a science, and I think not just because she's my friend, but Vicki Mitchell's just so good at what she does year in and year out. Like, there's such a science to distance running and keeping people healthy. Like, that's huge. I mean, there was a point in my life, 80, 100-mile weeks on a 5'7", 5'6" body with, So there's that. There's all of that. But so much of it, too, is mental. Like, my number one event on the track was 10,000 meters. That's 25 laps
Right.
around a track.
Right.
Like everyone goes and, no one comes to watch that. You
Right.
know, you even, tune it out during the Olympics, right?
Right.
But the mental strategy of that, and then teaching that mental strategy and having the coaches that I had about the mental strategy and performing way beyond your talent level is what I credit all the people that have ever worked with me. Probably in terms of just getting the most out of my running, it was the legend of legends, Bob Ivory.
Right.
And I had an opportunity to work with him when I was training for marathons when I was in law school. And I've loved every single coach I've run for. I really have. They've all taught me something, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about trying to give back and find that same opportunity for other young people.
And now you've used running, not used it, but recognized for running and for your administrative work, the NCAA and the stuff you do now at university now, and now you're a Hall of Famer. So talk about that when you got that call and what that means to you, from the little girl who didn't have athletic ability, right, to Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and as I don't want you to see me cry, so I don't want anyone here.
That's why I
That's
asked
going to
the
be my
question,
thing.
though.
I know, no, I'm not shedding that tear. There's so much packed into this because unlike some of the amazing class that I'm so humbled to be with, like if you look at, I wasn't Vicki Mitchell, and I wasn't even some of the bigger names of running that, I think it's kind of that collective work. And for that to be honored is I really feel like it's everyone else being honored too. It's everyone from my mom and dad,
Right.
my siblings, the town of Amherst Youth Recreation Services. Like, Ron Berdovich is already on me like 5 minutes, Bridget. You got 5 minutes at that reception. And that's really hard for me because I really feel like, I say it to my students all the time, like I could retire tomorrow and still, because I feel like I've had a life that I don't even deserve in terms of the opportunities and the people that I got to interact with. And so getting in the Hall of Fame is so emotional from a standpoint. I mean, of course, my father. And my father, everyone gets the person. Like my mother, I owe everything to. My father was my person in life. He was 55 when I was born, Tom. Just imagine that.
Yeah, yeah.
Both of you.
Imagine that as a 55-year-old.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Just imagine that.
I got a few
what?
months.
Yeah.
Excuse me, what?
So I came into his life, and there was so much of his life that was just I mean, his basketball, World War II, like after basketball and coaching and all those things. But like, he really was the person that got me in life. And losing him in 2007, and the fact that most my kids really didn't get to know him, like that is just so to be able to go in with him, who just, even in his later years, and this, I was still a teenager, I still put them through the ringer, right? And they were just so great. So that means a lot. And I knew from a young age that in our little world of Western New York, my dad was somebody who people respected. And I think each of my siblings felt a responsibility to conduct ourselves with the same type of integrity, honor, worth ethic as my dad. I know as the youngest, I felt like, and you're the youngest, we're so obnoxious. Sure. Like we just want to fit in. We just want to feel like the older siblings see us.
Just keep up.
And I think there's so much in that. So there's like the part of my life that my dad didn't really get to see. And then there's the part of my life that he clearly was who really inspired me on most days, pushed me, and quite frankly said stuff that, I don't know, I guess a parenting advocate today would maybe say not to say, but I kind of pushed back on that. Like we had this whole discussion about mediocrity one day after I ran a race. He wasn't at the race, so I was kind of like, well, if you came and seen me run, maybe.
Yeah.
But he didn't need to be at the race because it's Buffalo, so he talked to 5 people that
He knew about it, right?
Yeah, and just, so anyway, it's a lot. And then the last thing I'll say is, the last part of my life has been working with so many people that are on the board, and having that from them, having Ralph Galante congratulate you from an athletic director standpoint, like it doesn't get more emotional than that. Have a Denny Lynch, who I first interned, and we always joke, there's literally the 3 degrees of Denny Lynch in sport anywhere. Like that is tremendous to me. Ron Burdovich goes without saying. So.
Well, congratulations. We're looking forward to the dinner in November.
Thank you so much.